right now, and we are streaming. Hey, folks, how are you today? We are streaming to you live a little differently than we normally do. It's a Wednesday, not a Friday, but that's okay because in the United States we call this the hump day when we get past the middle of the week. And we are talking today about, you're here because you want to know if AI is killing JavaScript. Now, I got to be honest with you. We said that, but there's really a lot of language killing that's going on. But what is happening is we are hearing about how AI is affecting developers themselves. And so this is a baited question. It's a question about whether or not JavaScript developers are being affected by this and whether you should spend your time learning this language and all the attendant skills that come with it. So we're going to get on with that today, but I want to remind you that this is episode 86 of This Week in MeteorJS, a weekly newscast of the MeteorJS Dispatches podcast. My name's Alim Gafar, streaming to you live from New York City, and with me are
Küster from Germany. Hello.
And we have
Hello, Dvorak from Prague, Czechia. How are you doing, guys?
All right. And Jan, you might want to bring that microphone just a tad closer.
Yeah. Let me get that over here.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so with this, as we always do, we're going to start with a little bit of Meteor news.
So we are going to be doing Meteor news. We have only one item this week. And that is, there is an article called The Big Changes at Meteor Software, our next chapter. Let me just quickly get this up here. Apologies. So that is gonna, you might have noticed, Meteor.com has a new look on the website. You also have like a code test or code sandbox where you can try out a Meteor and with all its functionality. And Galaxy itself got a new domain, got a new look, as well as just kind of continuing the trend of Galaxy retheming, Galaxy version 2. So now it has its own dedicated website, and it's kind of more, say, advertised and geared towards more general Node.js applications on Python and everything else. So it's spreading out. So that's kind of the gist of the changes.
And I think without going too deep into that, because that could already take an own episode, but this is a good direction, I think, where things are going, because we talked about this for a while now in regards to things like a foundation and making Meteor sustainable. And when Galaxy is becoming even more profitable and the development goes back into Meteor, then we all profit from that, right?
Yes, that is at least the theory. We'll see how things evolve in the future. And that's the only piece. There have been other news, but we're keeping that for later so we can go more in depth, because there has been also a slew of news. Let me see if I can move things forward. But before we get into that, guys, please help us out. Hit the like button somewhere down here. And to let the algorithm knows that you are watching, that you are a human being, and that you would like us to continue providing this service. And our topic today, with all the dramatic pictures earlier and whatnot, is AI and JavaScript. And we're gonna get into this with this piece of news that I think had a lot of people swearing in some of the companies that are around AI, is that Visual Studio Code will open source, or they are wanting to make it into open source AI editor, and they are doing that by open sourcing Copilot, so that everybody else can kind of use the same tool set. This is important because Windsurf and Cursor had to fork Visual Studio Code, so that they could put in their own AI, hinting and all the other stuff, because that was before a closed source and there were some restrictions. So now that part is open source, and that changes, I would say, potentially has a kind of to shake up the ecosystem with all the AI help tools and whatnot. So definitely something to watch out. It's not the only thing that Microsoft has announced that they're open sourcing. Another one is, of course, the WSL, our Windows subsystem for Linux. But in our case, we are now right now concerned with this, because this, as I said, this has, I think, potential to level the playing field. We can probably expect that a lot of people or probably will come back. We'll probably see maybe some, again, centralization. I think it's pretty good. I would say overall win for the community, but at the same time, I have to say, but Microsoft.
Yeah, I mean, that's it's always this little undertone, there's always this feeling that is this part of a grand strategy to dominate everything, and I mean, we've known from the past, they just bought GitHub and basically NPM and they own open source already in some terms, and but on the other hand, I think this is the right direction still, because why should they leave it closed? And especially for developers, these AI models are anyway already black boxes, and the more we can do with them, the better. And when we look at that from the perspective, how does that influence JavaScript? Will that kill JavaScript? I mean, from this perspective, I think this will just be a plus point also for JavaScript as one of the most used ecosystems. And Jan, do you know if VS Code itself is written using JavaScript and TypeScript?
I've known that. I believe yes, that it's a substantial part of it is written JavaScript, TypeScript, because if I remember correctly, it's running on top of Electron, and you actually can. There's like, not sure if GitHub or somewhere I saw it, pretty much the Visual Studio, all the stuff thing in a browser as well. So yes, that's there in it as well. Of course, there are some certain parts that are written in other languages, especially I would, wherever it makes sense. That's the takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, this is, guys, we keep a look at these things over long term. So there might be an episode in the future where we will definitely point back to this episode from today and tell you like, hey, we talked about that in the past, and we will definitely get back to that in the future when there are significant impacts due to this move. I think there will be significant impacts, but we don't know which one yet, right?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I believe that's because of everybody's kind of going to return back, because here in this podcast, there's they are talking about all the stuff behind, like building windsurf and everything, and one of the key points is about forking Visual Studio Code, because the problem was that once you kind of fork Visual Studio Code, you do not have access to the marketplace and a few other things, which was always Python language servers and a few other things are kind of included there. So it was all about how do you fork this properly, and it's not easy because of of course you have all the legal stuff, which especially if you are a big behemoth like Microsoft, that's easy. You just throw a couple of your lawyers at it and figure out something out. But if you're like a smaller company, that's quite a significant issue, and kind of now move more into the AI. It also was looking at how do you build windsurf as an IDE to make it more easier to work with JavaScript and kind of have all the hooks in and all that stuff. And one of the things is that it's also kind of looking to, or one of the surprising things, like with Windsurf and all these other integration, is that a lot of non-developers are coming in and starting to work with it. They have no idea about the code, but they just want to use the tools and they want to produce something. So it's becoming more accessible, to more and more people. So that's an issue. In general, I recommend this. There's a lot of kind of behind the scene, and when also we say about this could have potential shakeup in the AI ecosystem, is because there's been, I remember the rumors of ChatGPT, or sorry, OpenAI wanting to buy Windsurf. So now that Visual Studio Code has kind of open source the black box that made it work like that, it's a question where it's going to come. If everybody is going to again come back to Visual Studio Code, which would make sense, because maintaining your own fork, as is in this podcast or interview, it's not easy. There's a lot of things that go into it, and that's so then it creates a problem. Yes, you have all this work just to maintain the fork, and above that, the part above that is what you actually want to build. That is the product you are selling. That's the the AI coding. So
okay, but maybe I don't just want to build a new IDE, an AI IDE, but maybe I just want to engineer a new AI application. Like how would I do? Oh, sorry, I just switched the item. It's not the next item. Oh my god, that was bad. Sorry.
So it's a leveling playing field, and when usually people build with it, it's usually JavaScript. But one of the things is, as we kind of are talking about non-developers coming in, this is not just with Windsurf, but everywhere. There has been this you could say leak of internal Shopify memo that says that if you want to hire somebody, you first need to demonstrate that the job cannot be done by AI. So it's kind of 180 in the original corporate policy of Shopify. And, looking at this, it's kind of interesting because we are kind of seeing that everywhere increasingly, and I'm also like kind of hearing or recently heard in an interview that internally the CEOs and upper management are much more, you could say, black-pilled, that they are much more, okay, AI is really going to be this devastating thing, is going to replace a lot of people and have all these impact that everybody's doing. Well, of course, when doing public presentation, everything, they're like, much more cautious and optimistic. But we are kind of seeing that, it's becoming more and more, AI everywhere. And
but Jan, don't you think that the way how it's pronunciated makes a huge difference? So, for example, when this Toby writes, using AI effectively. So if I'm putting my focus on effectively, then this whole thing has a much different context than if I just say using AI effectively is now a fundamental expectation. So the question here is, what has bigger importance, that it's a fundamental expectation, or that using it effectively, and reflexively, so like with using your brain, is the expectation. So do they expect everyone to use AI, or do they expect everyone who uses AI to use their brain when using it? And that's of course debatable, and but I hope it's the second one, that for them, it's just important to know the fact everyone is using it. We can stop it, but guys, don't throw your brain into the bin. So at least, I don't know, Jan, how you feel about it. For me, it sounds a little bit more like, guys, use your brain and not just the AI.
Well, and this again goes back to our vibe coding and everything as well. But in this case, what we'll see is, or what we see in general already, there's a lot of hype around AI. There's a lot of also success stories, but as much as there's success stories, there are also negative stories, because as you said, people are kind of throwing their brain into the bin and having AI work on everything. But those who can do both, kind of manage it. And this is, for example, in Windsurf and Cursor, we have kind of like the rules about how the AI should manage it and manage program things. Just today, I saw there's a new forum thread from Risk about Cursor rules with Meteor, all that stuff. So it is still kind of there, but talking about have to kind of really don't throw the brain into the bin. And but sadly, I think it's just there's this kind of push to put it everywhere, and the brain doesn't even come, I think, into the equation, because it's not that AI is going to provide that brain. So
Alim joined the server.
Hi guys, we had a lot of technical difficulties over here. Just really quickly, the gardeners are out this morning, and so it's a really noisy environment. So I was trying to find these phones before I brought everything back on. So I'm here now, and yeah, it's interesting listening to the conversation you guys are having so far.
Yeah.
It's
so let's move on to the main meat, because I think this discussion about usage of AI at this point, I believe it's pretty much settled. It's going to stay here, because and this was, I kind of didn't put it into notes because it was just mentioned somewhere else, but the AI is being used by the grassroots. That was kind of the point. So it's the developers, the individual workers, and even though, as we've seen with Shopify, it's kind of being forced down from the top, most of it is bottom up. And when you have that, that means it's not going anywhere. And especially now, kind of for us, the most important part with web development, what is the future there? And this article by Chris McKenzie really kind of digs deep into it, why he thinks that it's going to be JavaScript. Actually, let me just quickly check if we have not just missing one.
Maybe they order just this, but maybe we just missed an item. I think it's not that big of an issue, because let's focus on this right now. It's all coming up to the same conclusions, in my opinion.
Yeah, so let me quickly summarize this article, because I think what it came to is something that I would probably describe. So first of all, if you are building a modern web application today, you are using JavaScript. Meteor, we have Next, big ones, and there's a lot of Astro and a lot of other big ones. It's still on the server side. There might be some other languages being used, but at least whenever you are starting, usually start with full stack JavaScript, because of all the benefits that it gives. And today,
I think,
go ahead.
I think I was going to say, I don't know if it was this author or somebody else, but I believe they also kind of mentioned that if you want to just reduce it very simply, JavaScript's the language of the browsers, right? Every browser uses JavaScript in order to to allow actions to happen. I mean, changes are happening because of WASM a little bit, but for the most part, you know,
Yeah.
JavaScript's the language of the browser.
And one of the big benefits is because it's cross-platform compatibility. So that plays a big part into that as well. And the big also why it's so popular is it allows you for real-time adjustments in the code, and that is also that's what powers a lot of the tools as well. And he says powers real-time adjustments and intelligent suggestions, and it's already integrated with the AI that is in browsers as well.
So guys, and this goes especially to Alim. I know that you, for a fact, are playing with Python and doing some data science with Python in your free time in order to build things, maybe start a business and so on. And you have some experience with it. And how do you perceive that utility AI tools, machine learning tools in a JavaScript ecosystem compared to the Python ecosystem? Because my current view is, yes, I see this as well because JavaScript is the biggest ecosystem, but to me currently the most important tools for machine learning and AI tools are still in the Python ecosystem. If correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my perception.
It still is. I mean, there's a small use case with people that focus on building with Scala, for instance, and also building with C++ for speed. Those things tend to be when you're developing, and it's a very specialized skill that way. When you're doing that kind of production level, machine learning AI work. But I think here's the thing: I've tried to use JavaScript and the JavaScript libraries, and we've mentioned some of them. Some of them are listed here. Some are not. Transform.js, TensorFlow.js. There is ML5.js, I think, is another one. There are a few of them out there. When I tried them a few years back, they were very mature, and I wouldn't say that it was a great development experience working with those tools specifically. But there is a role for JavaScript in this, and it's one of the biggest roles they've had for a very long time. A guy by the name of John Osterhout, who is the inventor of the Tcl language, the tool control language, years ago wrote about scripting languages being glue languages that tie different services together. And Tcl is one of those. I was a Tcl developer for a while. And I think, again, here, it's also mentioned, maybe in this article, maybe elsewhere when we were doing our research, but others have basically said that, one of the things that JavaScript does well is it acts as a glue language. Sometimes it's okay on its own because of the single-threaded model, but quite often, what you can do with it and can do very effectively because it does handle, it uses the event loop to handle asynchronicity well, is that it's not necessarily the tool that you're going to use to do your own direct processing, although people do that. We do that with Meteor, but it's a tool that can connect from different services. So you have your deep learning or your machine learning script that's written in Python, right? And it is using it is using PyTorch, or it's using sklearn, right? Scikit-learn as the AI library, or the machine learning library, if you want to call it that, whatever you want to call it. Everybody's rebranding these days, so I never not quite know what term to use. But you can use JavaScript as a bridge language to hold to an API endpoint that's created with Python, and bring the results or of the processing in from, you pass what you want to process over to the machine learning model, and you bring the results back in to your web application or your mobile application or your front end, whatever it might be. So, I think JavaScript has a big role. I think it's been argued that it is probably the most ubiquitous glue language out there. and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And so, my 2
Yeah.
cents. What is that? What you were looking for?
Yeah, I mean that gives a more realistic. To me, this gives a more realistic view on those things because when you say it's a glue language, then it gives you more the idea of okay, there are still things under the hood running that are much more on the OS level and that are much more on the hardware level, and this is all the GPU computation stuff and
Yeah.
CUDA and all that stuff, which is required for the parallelized processing of these huge amounts of data. I know there are some things and libraries in Node you can use for that, but still, there is still some native implementation with C++.
Yeah.
Even in Python, many of these things with CUDA are all implemented with C++ or Rust if you're cool.
Yeah.
And then,
Well,
so
here's the thing. Python has some great number libraries like NumPy that are optimized for, matrix processing. We don't have that in JavaScript right now, right? So we're lacking some of those things. So when you're talking about doing things like, whether it's an in CPU or with GPU bridge, right? The truth of the matter is that it's a much better developed environment for handling things like matrix, mathematics, using libraries in Python than it is in Node. The other thing too is, manipulation of specific types of numbers like currencies is, it's still kind of iffy in Node applications.
Yeah.
But Python has this, pretty well handled. So I'm not pitching Python here, right? That's not the point, because every language does certain things very well. JavaScript has been great for scaling the web for quite a long time now. People crap on it a lot, but I think it's the fact that it was, for many years the #1 language. There was that term, JavaScript's eating the world, right? And there's truth in that. So it does a lot of really good things well. It does, your front end, your web app. It does some back end pretty well. I wouldn't give it everything, and I don't think it needs to have everything. And the other part to this is when we start talking about AI and so on, we start thinking about like our system. We have to think on a system level instead of just our application. Now, these, when you're running these large language models or you're consuming them, it's typically not part of any machine you're putting it on. It requires a huge amount of compute and space and so on. So you got to think past, my single stack here. Now you're thinking about a whole system where you have different services, backends, and so on that are feeding you information, that you're feeding information to it, that's doing some kind of compute for you. So you got to grow up a little bit in terms of your application stack and how you think. You're not going to be running this on your little VPS all by itself without tying into some external APIs, right?
Best tools for the job.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, when we think about this, we have to grow our mindset. And what it's doing is, in this new paradigm with these AIs out there that are also helping tools as well as consumption tools, that we have to start thinking about it like, look, if my clients, my customers, my projects are simple web apps, JavaScript is still going to be great for the job. It's still going to do the job very well. If it's going to be something more ambitious, it's going to include some calendaring system and some, appointment scheduling and e-commerce and so on. I might have a slightly polyglot system, but I can bridge that by using JavaScript, the JavaScript that I know from, writing my applications in MeteorJS, for instance. Or, if I'm an Express developer or a Next.js developer, let's be honest, there are a lot of them out there, then the skills that I've developed in terms of building applications this way and tying into libraries and other services is a transferable skill. And I don't think that goes away right away. So that's, and here's the other thing too, is I think one of the things is by itself, AI doesn't know if it wrote shit code, excuse my language. right? And sometimes it does. And, until we get to the point where we are having some kind of reinforcement learning, you've got an AI looking over the shoulder of another AI saying, hey, that doesn't look good. And we might get there. I think we're still dealing with developers, but now you're working with a whole new tool set and you've got to upskill in
I
a lot
think
of ways.
one big thing to kind of distinguish here, and this is just that's how the language has merged. There's a difference between AI and LLM, and we kind of advance the language that now when we talk about AI, we actually mean algorithms, the LLM, and not general artificial intelligence, which is kind of still a little bit stuff of sci-fi, even though it's being constantly promised. So when with LLMs, again, it's still a prediction machine, even though it's improving. And if you come to it and tell it, hey, write me a web application that does what it's going to do. Is it going to look, okay, what do I have the most information, what I have learned most about, what do I have the most data about? And
on Stack Overflow.
Exactly. Stack Overflow, GitHub, which kind of also explains why quality of code is where it is, because there's a lot of example repositories, a lot of early stage and high developers, so that influences it a lot. So the data it has is will be so when you say web application, it will think JavaScript.
Yeah, that you bring me to an idea. Maybe we have to investigate, because I have an assumption here that we might need to prove or disprove, and that is that maybe there are many big JavaScript projects out there that are just well documented. Because then that not just there are many out there, but there are also many projects out there. Like, I mean, even Meteor has a great documentation internally. Even if it's lacking at some points, it still has when you look into the code, there are sometimes 200 lines of some documentation explaining what happens in a certain file, and this is something I personally also think makes a huge difference to other libraries and languages. And I know from some libraries also in JS, but also in Python, that there are many repos out there that are just badly documented or even not documented at all. And this is just so yeah. And maybe
you also have to
TypeScript
think
also
about
plays a role.
the cross-referencing from Stack Overflow and all the references there as well. So, it will always kind of come to that. So that's why we can, I think, definitely make I think agree with this article. That is the point. But at the same time, when we then what kind of JavaScript are we getting? That's where things can get, I would say, a bit problematic potentially for the future. And Theo here had a great video where he talks about React and why it has kind of won, especially when it comes to the AI or due to AI, because now everybody, when they go and start building web application with AI, what's going to come up? React.
Wait. Is this what he looks like when his hair is not colored?
Yes.
Holy crap! I didn't recognize him, and he's got no beard or a mustache.
Yeah, it confuses a lot of people because he still has like a backlog of videos that he puts in when he has colored hair. So let me quickly kind of summarize what he put in and why with React. And it kind of goes, again, a lot of data to train on, big ecosystem. That means JavaScript, then React, and AI has already decided because they have enough data for React to train on. And thanks to that, do all the recommendation and everything else that comes to it. So making a new solution kind of with React, or like if you go with another new technology, if you want to do that, that's kind of useless for the AI, and AI won't want it because part of the problem is you won't have enough data, and the data that it has trained on, unless you kind of start from scratch, won't be updated. So AI will then default to React, and then we'll have problems, distinguishing, for example, between Solid and React, and that's going to create also a problem for React as well, because as a result, thanks to wipe coding, the API is not going to change, because any new change and the new improvements, AI is going to reject that or ignore that, because it will not have enough data about it, and it will kind of conflict with what it already knows. So
yeah, well, I think there's a little bit of a flaw in some of this argument, though, right? Because the thing is, a lot of these frameworks, like React, for instance, comes out of Facebook. I know it's got its own foundation now, and it's independent, and really more being guided by the guys over at Next.js at Vercel, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing, like, with all of these frameworks, what they try to do is they try to solve novel problems that they encounter. And it tends to get driven by the developers that are part of that team. So if they run into something that requires now a new approach, it's going to happen. But again, with a lot of these models, and we're talking about things like Llama or ChatGPT or so on, it's foundationally driven by the needs of those corporations, right? But also the dollars, because retraining is very, very expensive, right? Until I have read a few articles recently about smaller models that are more domain specific and focused, and the performance that you get from them. So for coding and so on, it might be better to use a smaller model. But right now, everybody's working with these general purpose models, these generalized LLMs, and those are super expensive. And so it's really out of the reach of smaller companies to hit. But even if you were going to do a more domain specific, LLM that is code focused, maybe it's focused on just the JavaScript or C language families, right? Because JavaScript, syntactically inherits from the C style languages. Even if you did that, it still would be pretty expensive and out of the reach of many, many companies. Like, I couldn't afford to do it. I know a few people that have companies that are a couple of $1 million in revenue. I don't think they could afford to do it. So it's still out of the reach of the majority of folks that would want to be able to do it. And then you're basically, you have to consume the AI slop, right? You have to consume what other people are willing to say is important, and they're going to advance and move forward.
Well, Alim, right there is also the reason, kind of, which goes against your argument that if the corporations behind React solve a new thing and introduce new API to solve it, AI doesn't care. It's it's not in its training data. It's too new.
Right. But the big companies behind those models are always updating these models, right? So the thing is, they'll update it. I think there's going to be some updates, but the thing is, it's not going to get democratized down, right? It's going to get narrower and narrower.
Well, you will have human developers potentially using the new APIs and everything, but you won't have, for example, if you look at Python 2 to Python 3 upgrade, that's not going to be possible to happen. The same thing with Angular. And to put it a nice analogy here is that data kind of is the street when we think, because cars have not really changed that much, and React is the car. So, you can work with data, and the big thing, and what he says is that where the big thing and that's why we have the React compiler.
Okay.
So that is where all the magic is going to be happening.
Yeah, guys, I have to object with these things, because there is something missing, and that is what we already talked about in beforehand. And that is that we know that if the AI models will not continue to improve on existing codes and APIs and all that stuff, then we will very soon get into this loop of very bad output, and which will require any in any way curation on every level. And if we consider that Stack Overflow has, as of today, the same rate of answers as it had when it started, which is totally devastating, guys, this is crazy, then you know that the source of new free material to train code in context is gone. So there will be very soon a phase where they definitely need to find a way to constantly curate and keep the AI updated and consider new developments in code. And if you consider Vue becoming more and more important in the front end space, then I personally think that yes, React will still be definitely the number one, but I can't follow every of his arguments there, because they take into account that this whole thing has no incentive of developing further, but I think the incentives are definitely there also from the quality of data side, because what would we do now when Stack Overflow goes bankrupt in the next 2 years? Sorry that I'm talking about that, but just look at the chart. There is nothing to monetize anymore on Stack Overflow that much. Where do we get that high quality data? I mean, people can pay me. I'm semantically tagging their stuff. Give me $1,000 an hour, and I'm doing that. But that is the next big problem to solve.
Yeah.
Well, listen,
I
think
finish if I can quickly vary with the last 2 points that he makes there. And one of the things is that, in a way, React and a lot of the other tools are complete, or they are constantly, more and more dealing with more, say, less important or like more edge cases. And thanks to AI, it doesn't even matter if you are good, because the AI just is going to shove whatever technology it wants down your throat. And with React, it has gotten good enough. So in that aspect, there is, I would say, potential stagnation coming out of it until we have another, you could say, a paradigm shift that requires something new, or we have, AI coming up with its own programming languages or whatnot. But that, I think, it's more of the
so I
generation
think,
down the road, or general AI dream.
I think that's more likely. I mean, part of what drove this was, I think I'd said that I'd read something where somebody had said, by the way, with AIs, why do they need to write in programming languages anymore? They already talk binary, so why don't they just speak on the language that they can communicate directly with the computer? Because the programming languages are aids for us as human beings in order to translate our will into computer code, right? Into something that the computer can execute. So it's an interface layer between us and the machine, but it's the machine and the machine. Why does it need this? And we know, by the way, that these LLMs are capable of creating their own languages, because we've seen some. I'm sorry about this. We've seen. I'm glitching. I'm an AI, and I'm having a problem. So we've seen examples of these. For instance, I think Facebook was one of them. I think Storyteller, you mentioned that there was another example where you have a couple of AIs, they're talking to each other, and all of a sudden they invent their own language to be more efficient. And eventually the researchers either, shut them off because they really don't understand what's being said, so it's very hard to follow, or the experiment is over, right? So whatever the case may be, but we have seen situations where these things come up with their own means of communication that are not human understood and not human efficient. So that's kind of where this whole episode title came from, was the idea that, is there a point where the machine says, screw you, I mean, we're maintaining it, we're creating it, these new applications are coming out there. Why do we need the developer? Why do we need to talk in a language that you will understand? And I think actually that we do need that role still. But the problem now becomes, and we've seen this, it's that if you are an intermediate or expert developer and you have a good amount of experience, then working with the tool is not as hard as if you're coming for the first time trying to state an intention of what you want to build. We've seen people say, I've built an application. I've not seen anything but very sophisticated built by just vibe coding, right? Very, very, they're very, very MVP style. It works for, the Y Combinator startups because they're very much infant companies. They don't have a sophisticated suite of offerings that already exist that they now need to add into or need to expand or modify in some way, right? They're building things, it's completely greenfield. And this, by the way, was an argument with MeteorJS too, right? It's like it's great for greenfield applications, but when you have an existing stack, like how do you make it work? And there are ways to make it work, and we've discovered those over the years, but let's just get back to the LLMs and the vibe coding and what it does. The problem I see is what we see again and again being mentioned is that it does away with the need for junior developers, right? But this is a craft as much as it is a profession. And the way you get to be an expert or the way you get to be experienced is you work with others and you develop that skill as you go along. If we have no more junior developers, how do we get to intermediate developers and expert developers?
Oh, yes. And the question is also how does it reflect on the language itself? Because I know from other developers, especially that come from more scientific backgrounds, for them JavaScript is a total toy language, and they won't accept that it's an awesome language. You can build awesome things with it, but there are many arguments why it has many flaws, and I totally agree. But I just don't want to hear it out of the mouth of some Python people, because this is just there is no argument from someone who's using Python that JavaScript is a bad language. Sorry for that, but apart from that, it creates this feeling that people who are using this are already script kiddies, and if you have this very bad vibe coded AI output that is just somehow cooked together to make the new spaghetti, then this will just prove these kind of points. And I also suspect that in the near future there won't be any Rust developer doing vibe coding because this is also another thing here. Really, I think no ecosystem and community has that much of a hype train going on as the JavaScript community. It was riding the hype train for years in terms of libraries, frameworks, IDEs, front-end engines, back-end frameworks, and so on. And now vibe coding, it's just riding this hype train again. And I don't see that in C++ or in Rust. I mean, I just suspect that C++ and Rust developers who use AI, they will not do the full-scale vibe coding experience. I just can't imagine that. Show me one if you can find. Would be awesome to see.
I would not be surprised if there is some developer at some finance firm right now that is losing a couple of $1 billion because he decided to vibe code a component. When we're talking about organizations and industries where speed and correctness is really important, and they're using languages that have type safety built in, that have entire ecosystems to make sure that there's good performance and so on. I think we're looking at places where the adoption is going to be a little more measured, right? And so I don't think this changes. It changes a lot in terms of what's going on. It's a very exciting time to see all the things you can do with it. And however we feel personally about what these AI tools do to developers, I think we can also take the attitude, take the point of view is that this is like, this is a step up from code completion that we were getting from our IDEs after they added these in. Sometimes the suggestion was good, sometimes it was off, right? And what it was doing was it was trying to predict based on past knowledge and not future creative expression, right? So this is the thing that humans are doing pretty well, that and most engineers can do. They learn, it's a learned thing, and some are better at it than others. But when you're coming up with creative new solutions to ideas, to things, I mean, we have patterns and anti-patterns that have showed up that didn't exist before because some developer said, wait a minute, this thing just does not work anymore. We need a way to handle it, right? Or this pattern that we thought was very useful has too much overhead and really doesn't solve the problem in a way that, you know, that we as developers think is best for us, you know, to be able to either maintain the code or to execute the code, whatever it might be, right? You could think of your reasons. So I think we have to keep that in mind. It's a great emerging tool. It is still fundamentally immature. Some companies, I think, are, you know, are not, they're trying to be too forward and saying we're going to replace our developers with this, but we saw a few of them bring developers back after they're like, okay, we're going to be AI first, right? I don't think that that's a great way to develop a good relationship with your engineers now or in the future. But it is, they are, I'm trying to remember the names of the two. I think Anthropic might have been one. And there's another company out there that said, we're going to do this. And now they're kind of like pulling back. We had an article on it someplace. And is it on? By the way, this is a good point. We're chatting a lot. Like and subscribe on the channel. You know, keep this going. This is not going to be a topic that ends anytime soon. And it's certainly something that we want to hear your input on. But we also want to hear how you're using them to be more productive. We think Meteor is a tool that increases web development, you know, app development productivity. And this is yet another tool, these LLMs, that can help increase productivity. So how do you use them together to build your applications? We want to hear from you. We want to bring you on. We want you to share your experiences. All right. Is there anything else, guys, that we need to bring up here today? Because I feel exhausted from this right now.
Yeah, me too. I think we will definitely take a look in the future at it again and see how our predictions turn out.
Yeah, we can just wait a couple of months and the entire ecosystem is going to change again.
Oh, yes. Hype train keeps going.
The train keeps going. All right, guys. For those of you who joined us today, thank you so much for sticking around with us as we're exploring this very, very important and relevant contemporary topic. I don't think that this is going to change a huge amount. We all have our opinions, but you know what people say about opinions. We hope that we showed informed opinions today based on what others are talking about in the industry and where the conversations are. We wanted to weigh in a little bit. Do you feel the same way? Do you see the same things? If you have a different opinion, write it down in the chat. Let us know about it. Let's keep the conversation going. And with that, I'm going to say, listen, we have another episode coming up in another couple of days. So we'll see you on Friday. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.